I don't even think that I could even describe what I saw, let alone what I felt. But I found my mom.
Jennifer Jackson was born on November 10, 1965 in Tennessee, USA. While details about her parents remain unknown, it is known that she had two sisters, Cindy and Grace, and a half-brother named Eric. Information about her life started becoming available around 1980, and she was consistently described as a kind-hearted person. At around the age of 15, Jennifer moved to Memphis to live with her aunt and uncle. Her family was involved with the Church of the Holy Communion in Memphis, where her uncle served as a reverend. Jennifer demonstrated a strong drive for achievement and dedication to her studies from an early age. Besides her academic pursuits, she had a passion for sports, especially challenging ones, which led her to become a triathlete and excel in competitions. Jennifer enrolled at Memphis State University and graduated in 1985 with a degree in business administration at just 20 years old. Those who knew her during this period noted that she was not only an excellent student, but also compassionate and generous. After completing her studies, she married Nazmi Hassania, a former army captain of Lebanese origin. On March 17, 1987, they welcomed their first and only child, Nora. However, the couple soon divorced, and Jennifer raised her daughter as a single mother. Jennifer did not let the end of her marriage discourage her. She remarried when Nora was in elementary school, but the relationship turned abusive and ended in 2001. Her brother Eric later revealed that the man had even brought a gun to the divorce negotiations. Jennifer then began dating Mark Irvin, a Methodist minister. However, this relationship was also unstable, with frequent breakups and reconciliations. Jennifer's friends did not like Mark, and Nura later described him as controlling and manipulative. Jennifer and Nura lived in a beautiful house in the Memphis suburbs. Jennifer worked as an investment banker at SunTrust Capital Markets, where she was very successful and earned a salary that allowed her to comfortably support her small family. During this time, Nazmi reappeared in their lives. Despite having been absent during Nura's early years, Nazmi attempted to mend their relationship when she reached her teenage years. Nazmi owned a convenience store and also ran a limousine business. Although everything seemed legitimate on the surface, a tragic event brought his activities under scrutiny by the authorities. On the night of January 26, 2004, an unidentified man entered Nazmi's store with the intent to rob it. Nazmi apparently resisted, and the robber shot him, causing his immediate death. When the police were notified, they arrived at the scene, initially believing it was a robbery gone wrong. However, certain elements led them to suspect that it was a planned attack by someone who knew Nazmi well. Upon reviewing the security camera footage, detectives saw the assailant not only stealing cash from the register, but also entering Nazmi's office, seemingly searching for something specific beyond just money. The convenience store was located across from a strip club, and its patrons frequently used Nazmi's limousine services. Rumors soon emerged that Nazmi rented his limousines for questionable activities and possessed compromising video evidence of clients. Given this information, Authorities theorized that the attacker was looking for those videotapes and that Nazmi's murder had a deeper motive than simple robbery. It was also speculated that the incident might be connected to the Mexican drug cartel, Los Zetas. However, no concrete evidence emerged to identify the attacker, and the case eventually went cold. At the time of her father's death, Noura was 16 years old. The impact of his passing seemed minimal, as her mother had always been her primary support. Observers noted the close relationship between Jennifer and Noura. Jennifer was devoted to pleasing and indulging her daughter, and Noura confirmed they had an open line of communication, keeping no secrets from each other. However, Noura was a rebellious teenager, unlike her studious mother. By 2005, Noura was enrolled in the Gateway Homeschool program due to her struggles in formal education. She had previously attended various public and private schools, facing numerous issues. At 18, she was still in the 11th grade, typically for students aged 16. This was a constant concern for Jennifer, leading to frequent arguments about Noura's future. At one point, Noura expressed a desire to join the military instead of continuing her education. Noura often partied, used drugs and alcohol, and skipped classes. She wanted to be independent, and Jennifer was struggling to discipline her. As a single mother, Jennifer found it challenging to manage her daughter's behavior. By mid-2005, she decided to take serious action to address Noura's misconduct. She gave Noura an ultimatum. If she didn't start behaving and showing dedication to her studies, she would be sent to a boarding school. This, of course, led to more arguments and tension between the two. However, any quarrel between mother and daughter would pale in comparison to the tragedy that was about to strike the family. On June 4, 2005, Jennifer attended a wedding while Noura spent the afternoon getting a manicure in preparation for her evening plans. She first went to an Italian festival with her boyfriend and friends, then spent the night partying, as was her habit. Recently, she had argued with Jennifer, and after consuming alcohol and cannabis, Noura vented to her friends, complaining about her mother and using derogatory language to describe her. According to her friends, Noura left the party around midnight. After driving for a while and stopping at a gas station to buy cigarettes, she arrived home around 5 a.m. Jennifer should have been home from the wedding for several hours by then and likely sleeping peacefully. However, on her way to her room, Noura noticed her mother's bedroom door was open and the bathroom light was on, which was unusual. Upon entering the room, she discovered a horrifying scene. Jennifer was lying at the foot of the bed, completely naked and covered in blood. Initially, Noura tried to find a pulse and shook her mother repeatedly, trying to get a response. When there was no reaction, she ran to her neighbor for help, telling him someone had broken into their house and her mother was bleeding. The neighbor grabbed his gun and went back with Noura to the house. Once there, Noura called 911, telling the operator the same thing she had told her neighbor. Distressed and crying, she repeatedly asked for an ambulance to be sent. Unfortunately, there was no way to save Jennifer. Authorities arrived at the scene around 5:15 a.m. on June 5th. The first thing they noticed in the room, now a crime scene, was that Jennifer had been repeatedly attacked with a sharp weapon and her head was covered with a wicker basket. Despite being naked, there were no apparent signs of sexual assault, although this would need to be confirmed by the forensic examiner. The level of violence used in the fatal attack indicated a significant amount of rage towards the victim. Combined with the fact that her face had been covered, authorities suspected that the attacker knew Jennifer. The crime appeared to be deeply personal. Authorities estimated Jennifer's time of death to be between 1 and 3 a.m. the chief medical examiner of Shelby County, determined that Jennifer had died from multiple stab and puncture wounds, 50 in total, distributed across her chest, abdomen, back, neck, and arms. He concluded that 2 different knives might have been used, or it could have been a single weapon with both a sharp and serrated edge. He also found defensive wounds on Jennifer's hands and a recent contusion on the left side of her head caused by a blunt object. Sexual assault was ruled out. During their search of the house, police noticed broken glass in the kitchen from a door leading to the garage. However, the glass appeared to have been broken from the inside, aligned with a lock visible only from inside the house. Additionally, the exterior doors to the garage were locked, suggesting the scene might have been staged. They canvassed the neighborhood, interviewing residents, but no one had seen an intruder that night. The first suspect was Mark, Jennifer's on and off boyfriend. The detectives discovered that Mark had called Jennifer the night of her murder. During questioning, Mark claimed he was asleep at his home in Jackson, Tennessee, 90 minutes away from Jennifer's house, at the time of the crime. Despite this alibi, his repeated follow-up calls to the police for updates on the case aroused suspicion. However, further interrogation confirmed he had no involvement in the events of June 5th. With Mark ruled out, police turned their attention to another possible suspect, Nura. In her interview with the detectives, Nura recounted her activities that night, saying she had driven around after leaving the party. What she didn't mention was that she had stopped at a nearby Walgreens to buy first aid supplies. The police discovered this after finding a bag with these items in Nura's car. She had purchased bandages, peroxide, and other items typically used to treat a cut. Previously, authorities had noticed Nura had a bandaged hand, which she explained as a cut from a broken beer bottle at the Italian festival. Security videos from Walgreens showed Nura purchasing the items around 4 in the morning, and she admitted they were for treating a cut she had sustained. However, authorities were skeptical of her story, as the video suggested the cut was fresh, not several hours old. Over the following days, Nura gave different answers each time she was asked about her whereabouts on the night of the crime and how she injured her hand. On June 8, 2005, Nura was admitted to a facility in the Memphis area known for treating mental health and substance abuse issues. While she was hospitalized, her mother's funeral took place. The funeral services and subsequent burial for Jennifer were held on Friday, June 10, 2005, at the Church of the Holy Communion. Nura was allowed to attend the funeral but returned to the health center afterward. Upon her release from the hospital, Nura was permitted to live on her own since she was of legal age. Her aunts reported tension between them and Nura regarding the money from Jennifer's life insurance. The specific issue was how much of the money would be allowed for Nura's apartment rent. Nura did not seem to be mourning her loss. In fact, once she settled into her apartment, she frequently hosted parties. Several friends later mentioned that her place was a popular spot for drinking, with no parental supervision. By the end of the summer of 2005, after just a month in the apartment, Nura was evicted for causing disturbances, violating the lease, and having an unauthorized pet. While Nura continued her fast-paced life, authorities pressed on with their investigation. They initially found her attire suspicious. Known for being particular about her appearance, she was wearing a worn gray long-sleeved shirt on the night of the murder. This was unusual given that summer was approaching, and it was quite warm in Memphis. Nura later claimed she simply dressed that way, even wearing long sleeves to the beach. But to the authorities, her clothing choice seemed like an attempt to conceal something. The police also examined her cell phone records and noticed a suspicious pattern. Nura was typically glued to her phone, but on the night of the murder, between 1 and 3 in the morning, there was no activity at all. This time frame matched the estimated time of Jennifer's death. After speaking with the victim's family and friends, authorities learned that Jennifer and Nura had been experiencing significant conflict and frequent arguments about Nura's behavior. They also heard that Nura had shown an interest in what she would inherit if something happened to her mother. This led the police to form a hypothesis about what happened on June 5th. According to their theory, Nura and Jennifer had another argument, and in a fit of rage, Nura attacked her mother. After committing the crime, Nura allegedly cleaned up the scene and tried to cover it up. The police speculated that Nura left the house after brutally attacking Jennifer, drove to a friend's house, and then returned hours later, pretending to discover the horrific scene. One of the details the police used to support this hypothesis was Nura's 911 call. At one point, the operator asked if her mother had been shot, and Nura responded that she hadn't. According to the detectives, it wasn't immediately apparent how the wounds were inflicted, so only the attacker would know for sure. However, the police's theory was based on conjecture, relying on the tense relationship between Nura and her mother and considering Nura's rebellious behavior. They found drops of Jennifer's blood on the front step of the house, leading them to think Nura had disposed of evidence far away. But they never found the murder weapon or the bloody clothes Nura would have worn if she had committed the crime. They also didn't find any of Nura's or Jennifer's blood in Nura's car. Upon examining all the evidence, they discovered some hair strands in Jennifer's hand. A preliminary examination suggested it could be Jennifer's own hair. A more detailed analysis to confirm the hair's origin was never conducted. Another crucial piece of evidence that contradicted the police's hypothesis was Nura's nails. The police said Jennifer had fought her attacker, but Nura's manicure was in perfect condition the next morning, as shown in photos taken at the police station. Additionally, she had no injuries or bruises on her body, except for the cut on the back of her hand, indicating there had been no physical altercation or struggle. Eventually, the authorities found DNA evidence at the crime scene that did not match either Nura or Jennifer. They could not identify the source of the sample, but they were certain it did not belong to any family member. Despite the lack of forensic evidence linking her to the crime, Nura was charged with first-degree murder and arrested on September 29, 2005. Many of Jennifer's friends and acquaintances supported Nura's innocence, describing her as a devoted and loving daughter, incapable of committing such a crime against her mother. According to a family friend, Nura would often cancel plans to be with her mother whenever Jennifer needed her. These supporters felt the police were overlooking an important fact. Less than a year and a half earlier, Nura's father had been attacked, and after his death, Jennifer inherited his entire estate. This led some to believe that Jennifer might have unknowingly become the next target of the same people who had killed her ex-husband. However, the authorities dismissed this hypothesis, claiming they had investigated any possible connection between the two fatal attacks. Another aspect the investigators did not consider was Jennifer's numerous volatile relationships with various men. Although they were aware of her tumultuous romance with the religious minister Mark, they overlooked the fact that in the months leading up to her death, Jennifer frequently dated and spent nights with strangers. On October 5th of that year, Nura pleaded not guilty to the charge of murdering her mother. She was given a bail amount of $500,000, which she could not afford, leading to her being held at the Federal Correctional Facility in Memphis for the next 3 years awaiting trial. Finally, on February 9, 2009, Nura Jackson's trial began. As the state presented its case, Nura sat alone in the courtroom, without any family members by her side. The defense attorney took on her case pro bono. She argued that the authorities had no concrete evidence incriminating Noura beyond a reasonable doubt for the heinous crime against her mother. Valerie pointed out that Jennifer had been attacked more than 50 times, and it was hard to believe that her teenage daughter could have desired her death, let alone committed such a brutal act. Noura did not testify during her trial, and the defense did not call any witnesses. However, her attorney cross-examined several prosecution witnesses to demonstrate that the case against her client was weak and unfounded. The prosecution's DNA expert testified that neither Noura's blood nor DNA was found at the crime scene. He also confirmed that the authorities had not conducted tests on the hair found in Jennifer's hands. The defense attorney insisted that forensic evidence did not lie, and nothing at the crime scene implicated Noura. She also criticized the crime scene investigator, suggesting he had overlooked evidence pointing to another person. She highlighted a cat that appeared in some photos, implying there were other overlooked details in the investigation. Noura's pet cat had roamed freely around the crime scene during the investigation, potentially compromising the integrity of the collected evidence. The prosecution called several of the accused and victims' family members and friends to testify. A friend of Noura testified that around 1 a.m. on June 5, 2005, she received a call from the Jackson House phone, followed seconds later by a call from Noura's cell phone. Another friend testified that the night before Jennifer's murder, Noura had spoken ill of her mother, saying she should go to hell. A third friend told the jury that Noura called him between 4 and 5 a.m. on the night of the crime, asking him to meet her at her house. He was the only witness to definitively place Noura at the crime scene before the discovery of the body and the 911 call. The prosecution asked all of Noura's friends if they had noticed any cuts or bandages on her hands during the parties she attended before returning home, and they all said no. However, one friend mentioned during cross-examination that Noura had asked for a Band-Aid at the party on Saturday night. The neighbor Noura sought help from also testified. He recounted the events of that morning and noted it was strange that Noura entered the house ahead of him, even though he was armed and she was visibly scared of a potential intruder. Pastor Mark Irwin testified that he and Jennifer were not together at the time of the crime and that their breakup had been mutual. He reiterated that he was asleep at his home, 90 minutes away from the crime scene during the incident. He admitted to calling Jennifer but hung up before she could answer, realizing it was too late to be calling. One of Noura's aunts testified for the prosecution, mentioning a heated argument between Jennifer and Noura about Noura's drug use and partying lifestyle just a week before the murder. Noura's uncle also testified, discussing Noura's supposed interest in Jennifer's life insurance policy. Noura later said this statement hurt the most, as she loved her uncle dearly. After questioning 45 witnesses over 9 days, the prosecution rested. During closing arguments, the defense accused the authorities of conducting an incompetent investigation and urged the jury to prioritize forensic evidence over circumstantial evidence. However, on February 21, 2009, after 9 hours of deliberation, the jury found Noura guilty of second-degree murder, a lesser charge than initially brought but still severe for a young woman who maintained her innocence. But the story was far from over. On February 26th, 5 days after the verdict and a month before the sentencing hearing, the prosecution submitted a state notice regarding the omission of a statement related to the testimony of Andrew Hommick. The friend who had placed Noura at the crime scene between 4 and 5 a.m. attached to this notice was a copy of Andrew's third statement. This was a handwritten note he had given to the police on June 13th, 2005, approximately a week after his first two statements. In this third statement, written on the back of a letter addressed to one of his roommates, Andrew recounted a completely different version of events from the early hours of June 5th. He remembered going out with 3 friends and meeting another at a cinema near Noura's house. After leaving there, they went to a party, and during this time, Noura called one of the young men's phones looking for Andrew, as he had left his phone elsewhere. Andrew said they stayed at the party for a while but left when one of their friends tried to start a fight. He mentioned they had taken ecstasy. Around 3:57 a.m., Andrew and another friend wanted to go to a strip club. They stopped for gas and eventually decided to go home. Shortly after, they fell asleep. Noura's defense team filed a motion for a new trial, citing numerous issues, including the state's failure to disclose Andrew's third statement, which they argued violated her right to a fair trial. The trial court denied Noura's request for a new trial, and on March 27, 2009, she was sentenced to 20 years and 9 months in prison. However, her legal team did not stop fighting for justice. In 2012, they filed a motion with the Court of Criminal Appeals, which again ruled in favor of the prosecution, upholding Noura's conviction and sentence. Soon after, a new appeal was filed with the Tennessee Supreme Court. On August 22, 2014, after Noura had spent nearly a decade in prison, they finally secured approval for a new trial. According to the defense lawyer, this was the first case in Tennessee where a conviction was overturned due to 12 instances of constitutional misconduct. The court concluded that the prosecutor had violated a legal norm when she directly addressed Noura during her closing arguments, demanding that she tell the court exactly where she had been on the night of the crime. The first episode of misconduct and the second was that the prosecution withheld potentially exculpatory evidence from the defense by not disclosing Andrew's third statement, which contradicted his earlier testimony and statements. In January 2015, after a 5-month delay, the prosecution agreed to hand over Noura's case to the district attorney's office of a neighboring district. In May of that year, the new prosecutor offered Noura a deal, a reduced sentence if she pled guilty to manslaughter. On May 20th, Noura entered an Alford plea, where a defendant maintains their innocence but acknowledges that the prosecution has enough evidence to convict them. Although this meant that the true perpetrator who killed her mother would never be found, as Noura would be legally held responsible, she accepted the deal. By then, 28 years old, Noura said in later statements that she had lost faith in the judicial system. The new deal reduced her sentence to 15 years, but with time already served and good behavior credits, she would be released in just over a year. Facing a new trial, there was no certainty about how long it would take to organize or if a new jury would find her innocent. In August 2016, at 29 years old, Noura was released from prison, still proclaiming her innocence. A friend of her mother invited Noura to live with her after her release. Shortly after her release, she decided to move to Nashville with a woman she had met in prison and formed a romantic relationship with. Despite the challenges of finding housing as ex-convicts, they managed to rent a nice apartment with lots of greenery and open spaces around it. In March 2017, the prosecutor, after facing state charges of ethical violations, accepted a private reprimand and admitted that an error had been made during Noura's trial. Meanwhile, the dispute between Noura and her family continued. That same year, she reached a private settlement with her aunts, resolving the inheritance issue. Having completed her studies in prison, Noura began applying to various universities while working as a receptionist at an auto repair shop. She expressed a desire to work to help women in prison. Nina Morrison from the Innocence Project agreed to represent Nora, aiming to use advances in DNA studies from the past decade to determine who really killed her mother. As of now, no results have been announced. Meanwhile, Nora continues to rebuild her life after spending her formative years in prison. She maintains her innocence and has appeared on several programs discussing her experience. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Kara Nichols faced her share of struggles, turning to drugs during her high school years and grappling with addiction well into her adult life. She started working as an escort at 17, but didn't give up on her dreams and sought a modeling career as she grew older. On October 9th, Kara mentioned to her roommates that she was off to Denver for a modeling gig and then vanished, sparking a trail of leads that ultimately led nowhere. For a time, the police even had an unidentified woman in their sights as a possible link to the disappearance. Over the years, there were supposed sightings of Kara, but none held up under scrutiny. However, the breakthrough in this perplexing case would come from the most unexpected source. Kara Nichols was born on May 20, 1993. Her dad, Paul Nichols, was a businessman. Her mom, Julia Nichols, kept her job out of the public eye. Though there's no official record, it seems Kara was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. She had an older brother named Terrence, who everyone called Terry, and a younger sister whose name has been kept private. Kara was the middle child, and her parents saw her as the heart of their family. But that wasn't the only reason everyone gravitated toward her. She had this unique charm and personality that made people love being around her. Kara was outgoing, full of life, and super creative. She had a magnetic and sweet nature, making her someone you just couldn't help but like. Even her teachers were fond of her. One of them felt lucky to have taught her, noting Kara's incredible potential from a young age. Growing up, Kara was a happy kid, but adolescence brought its challenges. At 13, she got caught shoplifting and had to do community service. During her sophomore year in high school, she struggled with severe depression after the family dog died. Despite her parents' efforts to get her counseling, Kara resisted and even refused medication. The exact cause of her emotional struggle remains unclear, whether it was due to lack of professional support or some unspoken traumatic event. During this tough time, Kara began using illegal substances, eventually turning to hard drugs like heroin, which led to more problems. She started high school in Colorado Springs, where she lived with her brother Terry. But due to her addiction issues, she transferred to a more alternative school where she could graduate at her own pace. From a young age, Kara was drawn to the fashion world, especially modeling and makeup. After high school, she was determined to chase her dreams, despite her battles with substance abuse. Before she turned 19, Kara was working as a waitress while pursuing modeling, mainly in lingerie. She also thought about enrolling in cosmetology school to further her passion. Without prior connections in the modeling world, Kara uploaded her photo portfolio to a social network-like platform for photographers and models. On her profile, Kara described herself as responsible and passionate about modeling. She was new to the scene but took her work very seriously. Her mother, Julia, said modeling was like an escape for Kara. almost as if she took on another identity while doing it. In 2012, around her 19th birthday, Kara faced a setback. Her substance use led her to quit her waitress job, losing her main income source. That summer, she returned to her family home in Chicago, Illinois. Back under her parents' care, they convinced her to seek help, and she entered rehab to overcome her addictions. However, her stay was brief. She was expelled for not following the program rules. In August 2012, 19-year-old Kara decided to move back to Colorado Springs. She made friends with other local girls and kept daily contact with her older brother, Terry. On October 9, 2012 at 11:45 p.m., Terry got a call from Kara, who said she was heading to Denver for a modeling job. That was the last time anyone heard from her. After that call, Kara vanished. 2 days later, on October 11th, after trying to reach her without success, Terry visited her rented room to check on her, which was unusual since he hadn't heard from her for a while. Kara's roommates, Jeremy Swope and Archie Escobedo, told him she had left for Denver on the night of October 9th. Later, her parents, Paul and Julia, came to Colorado to search for her. They found her makeup box, phone charger, and $300 in cash in her room, which was alarming as these items were precious to Kara, hinting she might be in trouble. However, it wasn't until October 14th that the family reported Kara missing to the authorities. Paul informed the sheriff's office about her history of substance abuse and recent rehab stint. According to Paul, the police didn't take the disappearance seriously, barely making an effort to announce it in local news, and suggested the family was overreacting since Kara was an adult and didn't need to check in daily. In December 2012, investigators learned about a photo of Kara on an adult content and escort service website. An anonymous tipster also claimed to have seen her in Las Vegas. Yet, after thorough digital tracking, detectives concluded that Kara wasn't connected to the escort ad. Her photo had been used without her involvement. The case's investigation progressed slowly in the months following her disappearance. Things changed when Detective Tammy Tadlock took over the case on February 4, 2013. By then, there were 2 more missing young models who had been seeking work on the same website Kara used to post her photos and portfolio. The then president of the National Coalition Against Violence and Exploitation of Women linked the site to at least 13 disappearances of young women who used the platform. The website issued a statement denying any wrongdoing, emphasizing their priority was to protect aspiring models and teach them how to spot scams. In the same year, Detective Tammy found an ad on a website for sexual services dated October 9, 2012, featuring a photo of Kara in lingerie. This discovery opened new leads, revealing that only a few of Kara's friends knew she also worked as an escort. One of these friends, who met Kara at a party a year earlier and whose identity remained confidential, shared that they both struggled with substance addiction and bonded over their time in rehab in 2012. This friend disclosed that Kara was never fully sober, regularly using small doses of heroin to stave off withdrawal symptoms, which helped her function daily. The friend also admitted to accompanying Kara to her escort appointments and confirmed that Kara financed her drug use with the money earned from these encounters. The case's renewed activity led to several calls to the authorities with potential leads. One call suggested shifting the investigation to Long Island, New York, but the law enforcement team found no evidence of Kara being there or involved in any sex trafficking network. On May 7, 2013, after accessing Kara's cell phone records, Detective Tammy's office left a voicemail for one of the last numbers contacted before Kara disappeared. The next day, Joel Hollendorfer, born November 19, 1975, and with a lengthy criminal record starting in the 1990s, returned the call. He had no known siblings and a history of theft, motor vehicle offenses, and harassment. Joel, who was 6 feet tall and weighed 194 pounds, had been married to Christina, with whom he had 2 children. His marriage was strained due to his drug addiction and frequent hiring of escorts. Joel's connection to Kara's disappearance seemed clear from the phone records, but his subsequent statement to Detective Tammy complicated the investigation. Joel confirmed owning the phone number in 2012 and said he spoke with a girl using a pseudonym that night. He claimed they texted and called for hours but never agreed on a meeting place, so he never met her in person. It was later confirmed that Kara worked as a prostitute under the pseudonym Joel mentioned. Detective Tammy pursued this lead, uncovering that Joel had listed his address in a place owned by his parents, John and Betty. A volunteer who analyzed Kara's phone records had been a reserve police officer in Santa Clara, California, and a manager for a special security program. A U.S.-based multinational company specializing in aerospace and military industries provided additional training to him in land navigation, a skill he used in the Army. Leveraging his acquired knowledge and the cell phone company's geolocation services, he mapped out Kara's last known movements from October 9th until the morning after, right before her phone went silent. According to the data, he placed Kara at the intersection of Goodman Road and Black Forest Road around midnight. This path, unusual in Kara's routine, was frequently traveled by Joel as it led to his house. Meanwhile, Detective Tammy discovered that on the day she disappeared, Kara spent time in her room with 2 brunette girls. By November 2013, authorities identified and located one of these girls from Colorado Springs, who cooperated with the investigation to piece together the events of October 9th until the friends parted ways. However, the second girl, who reportedly spent more hours with Kara that day, remained untraceable by Colorado authorities. Despite significant progress in piecing together Kara's last known activities and contacts, Detective Tammy was soon replaced as the lead investigator. Her successor doubted Kara's alleged modeling job in Denver, but couldn't prove or entirely dismiss it. More leads on Kara's whereabouts surfaced, yet none pointed in the right direction, with many suspected to be false, possibly meant to disrupt the search effort. Furthermore, new posts on the escort website featuring Kara's photos appeared, some dated months after her disappearance. Police analysis confirmed Kara had no connection with these ads. For months, the police traveled across various U.S. cities and states, following the scant leads from their investigation, but to no avail. However, Detective Tammy's efforts finally bore fruit on October 2, 2014, over a year after first contacting Joel. The police obtained a search warrant for his parents' property, executed 13 days later using ground-penetrating radar. The team identified several altered ground spots. Betty, Joel's mother, guided the search, pointing out areas where they had buried horses and other animals since they bought the property in the mid-1980s. No excavations were made at these suspected animal burial sites. However, Betty suggested searching another property accessible to Joel on Green Acres Road. She contacted the owners, who allowed the authorities to search it. This second search took place on October 21st and 22, 2014. On the day of the search at the Green Acres property, police experts positioned 4 bloodhound dogs at each corner of the area. Once released, all dogs headed straight to the same spot, an area that looked recently dug up, about the size of a grave, but no human remains were found there. When the search at Green Acres started, Joel was interviewed by the police. In the recorded conversation, he confirmed speaking with Kara in October 2012, but his story changed. He admitted planning to meet her at the Waffle House, but claimed she never showed up. He also mentioned that his regular encounters with sex workers and drug addiction were the main reasons for his divorce from Christina. The detective in charge, observing Joel's reactions, explained that they had tracked Kara's movements that night using her phone's geolocation. Joel became more attentive, and the detective revealed that the last known location of Kara was just a minute away from his parents' house. Joel suggested that Kara might have followed him home to rob him, maintaining that he never met her in person. Frustrated by Joel's lack of cooperation and without new evidence, the investigation stalled for years. A breakthrough came in 2022 when Colorado Springs police located Christina Hollendorfer in Virginia. She had been reluctant to cooperate with the initial investigation, but during a meeting with the FBI, she revealed that after her father-in-law's death in 2014, Joel confessed to accidentally killing a sex worker by suffocating her during sex. According to Christina, Joel said the body was buried at his parents' property, above a horse's grave. Later, in a phone interview, Christina expressed her belief that Joel's parents, John and Betty, knew their son was responsible for Kara's disappearance and were covering for him. This testimony led to Joel's arrest. In custody, he met with the police investigators. They showed him aerial photos of his parents' property and asked him to identify the animal burial sites. When asked about a specific spot, Joel denied anything was buried there. However, a week later, when Betty was questioned, she contradicted her son, identifying the same spot as the grave of Milo, her favorite horse. Authorities quickly mobilized to uncover the mystery behind Kara's disappearance. A team of volunteers and FBI agents began a new search on the property, focusing on the area where Betty's horse was believed to be buried. Less than 3 feet underground, they found human remains, which were carefully extracted and sent to forensic experts for identification. It was later confirmed the remains were Kara's. The autopsy report noted significant damage to her brain, liver, and muscle tissues, suggesting a possible heroin overdose. However, due to the body's advanced decomposition, the exact cause of death couldn't be determined, so the authorities relied on Christina's earlier statement for the official report. Joel was immediately arrested on charges of second-degree murder and tampering with physical evidence. His bail was set at over $1 million. At a preliminary hearing on November 27, 2022, his defense lawyer argued that Kara's death was an accidental result of a consensual sexual encounter involving drug use, claiming Joel hid the body out of fear without intending her death. The prosecution countered this by stating that Kara had used up her remaining drugs hours before meeting Joel, making a drug overdose as the cause of death unlikely. They argued that Joel had killed her. The case judge concluded there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial, ordering Joel to remain in custody without bail. The arraignment faced delays due to the defense's stalling tactics, aiming to buy time for Joel before the trial started. In January, when the first meeting between the prosecution and defense was scheduled, the defense lawyer chose not to make any statement. A month later, she pleaded not guilty on Joel's behalf, requesting a trial start date of June 12, 2023. In May, during a meeting discussing jury selection and media coverage, Joel's legal team objected to live social media broadcasts, arguing it could affect the trial's fairness. The defense also sought to dismiss the evidence tampering charge, citing the time elapsed since the incident. Finally, on June 10, 2023, over a decade after Kara's disappearance, the trial began. The prosecution made a striking start by displaying Kara's high school graduation photo, followed by images of the garbage bags where her remains were found. The prosecutor focused on Joel's actions, urging the jury not to scrutinize Kara's behavior. The defense attorney acknowledged Joel's involvement in Kara's death, but emphasized it was an accident, as per his ex-wife's statement. The trial featured 14 witnesses, including Kara's roommates, her family, her ex-boyfriend, and others who had contacted Kara for escort services, all claiming they never met her in person. Detective Tammy also testified, providing a detailed account of her investigation, followed by Christina, Joel's ex-partner. Christina delved deeper into their relationship during her testimony, especially highlighting Joel's 2014 confession. She described their marriage as unstable, marked by separations and reunions until they divorced in 2012. However, they reunited 2 years later. After Joel's father suddenly passed away, Joel took Christina in his truck to a gas station near his family's farm, where he confessed to killing Kara and mentioned he had disclosed the incident to his father, feeling he owed him an explanation after authorities searched the family property. Joel also believed he caused his father's death, attributing his heart attack to the shock of the confession. Christina, skeptical of Joel's story, remained silent on the matter until nearly a decade later when investigators approached her. The forensic pathologist who conducted the autopsy provided crucial testimony, noting high levels of heroin in Kara's system, but argued that drug overdose alone was an unlikely cause of death. He reasoned that Kara's habitual drug use would have increased her tolerance, making a fatal overdose less probable. However, he also noted that her heroin-affected state could have prevented her from breathing properly, not fully dismissing the defense's theory but maintaining a neutral stance, allowing both sides to leverage his testimony to support their arguments. Significant evidence presented at trial included the recording of Joel's first interview with Detective Tammy in 2014. After a lunch break, the prosecution called various crime scene experts who had been part of the initial search at the property where Kara's body was found, including volunteer geologists who explained the use of specialized equipment in 2014 to detect human remains, noting that while anomalies were found on the property, they could not confirm the presence of human remains at that time. In their closing arguments, the prosecution proposed that Joel, fueled by anger from being spurned by his ex-wife, sought out Kara for a paid sexual encounter. They suggested that his rage escalated during the meeting, leading him to strangle her to death. In the final stretch of the trial, the prosecution laid out evidence of Joel's repeated attempts to call his ex-wife on the day he met Kara, just hours before their encounter. The prosecutor challenged the notion that Joel's actions were merely reactions to an overdose death, suggesting instead that they aligned more with an intentional killing. The defense admitted Joel's actions were wrong but argued there was no concrete proof of his intent to kill. The defense's closing argument hinged on the lack of evidence to dispute the claim that Kara's death was accidental. 12 days into the trial, after nearly 5 hours of jury deliberation, Joel was found guilty of manslaughter, significantly reducing his potential sentence. Kara's mother, Julia, presented a heartfelt testimony that echoed the family's deep disappointment and shock at the verdict, feeling the jury failed to grasp the crime's severity. The judge, bound by the jury's decision, noted that Joel's prior convictions would be considered aggravating factors, potentially extending his prison time. On August 31, 2023, Joel was sentenced to 24 years in prison. This sentence left Kara's family and friends deeply disappointed, feeling the defense had unfairly blamed the victim. Kara's loved ones vowed to attend every parole hearing to ensure Joel serves his full sentence, publicly opposing any future parole. While Julia appreciated the judge considering the aggravating factors, she found the 24-year sentence too lenient, given the crime's gravity and the time Joel hid her 19-year-old daughter's body. The family also criticized the media's portrayal of Kara, arguing that instead of remembering her as the vibrant and kind person she was depicted as just another sex worker and addict. They emphasize that her profession did not justify her murder and the subsequent concealment of her body, which caused immense pain to her loved ones. That wraps up today's case. Remember to subscribe and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. See you in the next Unreal True Crime episode. Goodbye.